Welcome to the Health Babes podcast. Today we have Kelly LeVeque on. She is a celebrity nutritionist and she is an author and she has some amazing online programs and she's just amazing all around. So we are covering a lot of great things that are really necessary when it comes to diet. We're talking about blood sugar. We're going to focus on that today. We're talking about the difference between hypoglycemia and hyperglycemia, why it's important to balance your blood sugar, in your body, in your children's bodies, what the most common foods that cause blood sugar dysregulation are, what foods you should eat to help with blood sugar dysregulation, intermittent fasting, and a lot of other great stuff. So let's get started. How are you doing, Kelly?
I'm good. What's going on, Dr. Becky?
Not a whole lot. I love Kelly. The way I found Kelly was on TV. She has been on E so many times. And then I was on Kelly's podcast. She has a really great podcast, which I'm going to ask you at the end where everyone can find you.
Yeah.
And then we've kind of stayed in touch ever since. So I have to tell a funny story. So the other day, and even though I know as much as I do about nutrition, when I was watching Daily Pop on E and they're like celebrity nutritionist and they didn't say your name. And they said for Jennifer Lopez, and they were like naming people who all have amazing bodies. And I'm like, ooh, I need to know who this is. And it was Kelly. That was cool to me. I was like, I know Kelly.
You're like, wait, I know that girl.
Yeah. I'm like, no, I was like, yeah. And everything you said was so spot on too, which I loved. It was just like little simple things that people could switch out that people think they're doing well. Like one of them was oat milk and you were like saying to switch that out and stuff. So anyway, I was like, yes, this is why I love Kelly. Everything she said was what I agree with. So anyway, that's my little story to tell. But today I want to talk about blood sugar because it's a really important topic. And I know you know a lot about this and you help people with this. So first of all, I would like to know how you got into being a celebrity nutritionist, because I think a lot of people would want to know that.
Sure. Well, I went to undergrad at the University of Southern California, actually for business finance. And I took my science classes my senior year. And one of those courses was Nature of Human Health and Disease. And my thesis was on diabetes type 2. So blood sugar induced diagnosis. And I called my dad crying and I was like, what am I doing? I don't want to be business finance like you. I should be pre-med. I should be an RD. I should be in the hospitals. Like I should be a kinesiologist. And he was like, that's nice, honey. You can go ahead and pay for your 5th year if you want, but it's on my dime, you graduate in June. And so I decided that I was going to add courses to get a concentration in science, and then which is like a minor, or not as many courses as a minor, but enough to like get into the field.
Yeah.
And ultimately ended up pairing my business degree with science and working first for Johnson & Johnson in pharmaceutical sales, which is like, it's just like love and other drugs. Like they're not listening to you. You may have, I spent close to a month on the East Coast learning how to read studies and learning how to look for p-values and learning how to present them and break them down. And so what's so amazing is like, I did actually loathe that job because it wasn't a productive conversation with the doctors that I was working with, but more it was like, hey, what snacks did you bring me? But what I gained from that experience, my first job out of college, was being able to take scientific information, new studies and new information from PubMed research, and to say like, was this a double-blind placebo study? Does it have a significant p-value? What was the setup of this study? Who was it funded by? And what is it telling me at the end? And so that was invaluable. And from there, I moved into cancer and genetics. So I worked for a really cool company and ended up teaching and training a whole sales force underneath me on how to understand how our genetics play a role in our health. So we can take the genome of a solid state tumor, like a breast cancer tumor, and understand the feeding pathways of that and what genes are being turned on. And we talk about epigenetics, right? And that is
Right.
so cool. It's like someone's lifestyle may turn up or turn down a gene, and in the tumor, we can see those genes turned up or turned down. And then we know they knew on the back end of that, which chemotherapy agent, which treatment like radiation would actually stop the growth of that tumor. So it was more, instead of the olden days in the 80s and 90s where they went, you have cancer, here's a bunch of chemo, we're going to blow everything up and you're going to be so sick, talk about a cytokine storm, but like we're just going to attack your whole body. They were really strategic with it. But at the end of the day, like from the day I graduated college until the day I decided to go back to become a clinical nutritionist, I was looking up nutrition studies, and I was like appalled by the fact that these cancer patients were being handed Snickers bars and Ensure bottles and just being told like it doesn't matter what you're eating. It just, you need to get calories in so you don't lose weight and so your body can fight this. And it's like, all I knew in my heart was that this was the absolute wrong way to treat these type of patients. And that it's a way bigger problem than just demonizing processed foods. Like, there are companies that are being paid to produce these like processed grains and sugars, and they're cheaper than, healthy whole foods. And it's like a whole systemic problem. But at the core of it, I kind of had to ask myself, like, what do I really want and how can I really help these people? And so I went back to school for clinical nutrition because I'd always loved it. Since way back in college, when I was like making my own food in my apartment and wanting to support people and teach people and talk about it. Ultimately went back to school, side hustled my clinical nutrition practice, seeing people on the nights and weekends, ultimately building up a roster to be able to leave corporate America. And, to my dad's dismay and his disappointment, left my 401k and my company car and all of the perks that came with like having a big corporate job to really try to help people from the ground up and like from the beginning, from what they're putting in their mouth because I really do truly believe like when I understood how blood sugar balance worked, I stopped caring about calories. And I looked at the nutrition density of food. I looked at how foods work together. I had this food freedom that I'd never had before, which was, oh, I don't have to be hungry every 90 minutes or 2 hours. I don't have to be white knuckling it and trying not to eat the junk food in my cabinet or the popcorn that's put out at that party or whatever the case may be. It's like, I can feel this sense of calm and grounding from the food that I eat. And it doesn't have to be calorie counted. And it doesn't have to be, I think back to, I'm sure we all have these stories back in college when before I understood this concept where I was like, okay, like, a high protein, low calorie diet where I was like, cool, like I'm in the gym at USC, then I'm like coming home and putting mustard on tuna instead of mayonnaise, like,
right.
And you're
low
like,
fat.
that is like actually disgusting, and not
right.
satisfying. And, it is this amazing gift that I can give clients, which is the science of blood sugar for them to understand like, oh, if I start my day with protein and I have a little fat and some fiber rich veggies or, mix it up, like I can go for 4 to 6 hours without thinking about food. And when people talk about intermittent fasting or when they talk about not snacking and not feeling the stress of like walking into your kitchen and knowing your pantry is like screaming for you to come eat something, like all of that comes from understanding science. And for me, it's like all of these diet books that started to come out, it like was crystal clear to me that a lot of the metabolic benefit coming from Atkins or South Beach or Protein Power, or like not these early 90s, early 2000 cleanses like cabbage soup or something. I'm talking about the real doctor-backed scientific diets that were coming out of research. They were all saying the same thing. They were saying like, eat whole foods. Don't forget about protein. You need amino acids to create hormones and neurotransmitters. Healthy fats help you absorb fat soluble vitamins. Like, and that was, coming off the low fat craze, moving into people being open to fat. And, Atkins phase 1 is a ketogenic diet. Like, so that may not work for everyone. And in the Atkins diet, it's a short-term fix, but like looking at it, I just kind of just started to see like, this is all the same pig in different lipstick. Not that it's a pig, but like it's all the same science at the core. And we all just need to find our individual response to that and what works best for us. Like you have a specialty in histamines and hormones. Like that's a layer on top of blood sugar, but like at its core, it's almost like understanding your menstrual cycle and fertility. We were not taught this in high school and
Right.
college, like how our foods interact with our body and how they can give us energy, maintain that energy without a crash, without inflammation. And so my mission and my passion is to explain how foods break down in the body, what they create, how that energy is sustained, how it's elongated. And then on top of that, it's like I work with functional MDs and doctors like yourself to say, okay, now that you have the basics of your nutrition knowledge, you know what fills you up, what satisfies you. Is there anything in your genetics? Is there anything in your microbiome? Is there anything coming up on your Dutch test with your hormones that says maybe we should switch some things up? And then we
Yeah.
just keep tweaking until that person feels their best. And so I'm an optimizer in that respect. But we can't optimize if someone's starting their day with oatmeal covered with oat milk with some frozen berries and they're afraid of fat.
Oh my gosh. And you see that all the time. I mean, they think they're doing well. And I'm like, you're setting yourself up for failure with that breakfast. I mean, people don't understand your whole mood and energy level and sleep and everything depends on your blood sugar.
Absolutely,
And
100%.
it's the core. I mean, it really is the core to everything as far as diet goes. I think stabilizing blood sugar is number one. And then you work on other things within that too. But it has to be there. If you're not stabilizing your blood sugar, it doesn't matter if we get into histamine or whatever, you're bringing on, because you're not going to feel right.
Right.
So
100%.
let's kind of back it up a little bit for some people who don't even know what dysglycemia is. Cause there's an issue with high blood sugar, but there's also an issue with low blood sugar. So can you kind of give us what is hypoglycemia and what is hyperglycemia?
Yeah, let me explain how blood sugar works and then
Yeah.
I'll touch on when you might have hyper versus hypoglycemia.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when we look at the foods that we eat, we have three macronutrients. You have proteins, you have fats, and you have carbohydrates. And so proteins break down to amino acids. For simplicity, that's what you want to remember. Proteins break down to amino acids, fat breaks down to fatty acids. Both of those things are not glucose, right? They are not blood sugar. When we look at carbohydrates as a whole, carbohydrates break down to glucose, which is blood sugar. So we eat a carbohydrate in our mouth, we're breaking it down. There's enzymes. Salivary amylase is already immediately in our mouth trying to find sugar, break it down, help digest it. We digest it in our stomach. Then we even have like brush border enzymes in our intestines that are helping to break it down even further. Glucose comes into our bloodstream. So that is blood sugar. So when you think about carbohydrates as a whole, you have all different types of carbohydrates. So if you think about whole food carbohydrates on one end of the spectrum, these are like, and low glycemic carbohydrates. These are like berries, cucumbers, broccoli, asparagus. I think I have clients go, wait, what? Those are carbohydrates? Yes, those are primarily and mostly carbohydrates. When we look at food from nature, there's a lot of times where it's a blend of things. Like a nut, for example, is protein, fat, and it has some carbohydrates in the form of fiber too. But when we look at your fruits and your veggies, your low glycemic ones, they have carbohydrates wrapped up in a fiber cell. So as we digest them, little bits of glucose are entering our bloodstream slowly, because we have to actually break down and ferment through all of those fiber particles that are wrapping up. And it's almost like delivering a perfect package of carbohydrates. Yeah. And I love the way that when we go back to eating nature-based foods, that nature supports us, because it's a slow drip of carbohydrates through the fiber cell that's being added to our bloodstream and slowly causing a rise in blood sugar. And so when you move into things that are maybe starchier, like squashes and sweet potatoes and corn and peas and things like that, like there is more starch. It's still wrapped in a fiber cell. So there is a little bit of a slower drip. As you move into grains, even more carbohydrates. And I'll give you an example, like the net carbs on butternut squash is 16. The net carbohydrates on a cup of rice is 99. And so we're talking about a difference in the amount of blood sugar that's entering our bloodstream. And then we want to think about the speed at which that stuff enters our bloodstream. So let's talk about speed, because that is really where we start to understand hyper versus hypoglycemia and really this blood sugar roller coaster. So we talk about all the things that are wrapped in fiber. Nature is doing a good job of slowing that down for us. We can also add things to slow down the rate of which blood sugar is absorbed.
Like fat. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So think about fat like a blanket. Like we always say, never eat naked carbohydrates. Don't eat carbohydrates alone. This is that like idea that if you have an apple, dip it in almond butter. Almond butter has protein and fat in it. I love thinking about meals in balance. So let's say that you did want to have some sweet potato. I would say I'm looking for protein and fat on that plate. Like you're having a little bit of chicken or salmon or steak, or maybe you're doing a hash with some sweet potato and some ground beef and some broccoli, right? So and you're cooking it up in that meat fat, or maybe you're sauteing the broccoli in a little bit of olive oil or roasting it or whatever the case may be. We're looking for those healthy fats and protein that do a good job of slowing it down. And you can think about protein and fat, like I said, as like a blanket around the carbohydrates. It's adding an even extra layer on top of that fiber to say, like, we have to work hard to break down and get to this sugar. It's not just going to be a skyrocket blood sugar experience, like a spike and a crash. Whereas you look at things that are processed. So all of those carbohydrates I talked about that are wrapped in a fiber cell are called cellular carbohydrates, because the sugar or the starch is wrapped in fiber. Now, acellular carbohydrates, these are the things that are processed. These is anything that is broken out of its fiber cell. And that is anything that is flour based. So we're talking about tortillas, we're talking about pastas, we're talking about breads, we're talking about juices, we're talking about even maple syrups and honeys, like things that are, even though those sugars are not refined, they are considered liquid sugars, and there's no fiber wrapping up. Someone might say, oh, maple syrup is great for you, or honey is great for you because it has this antibacterial effect, or it has extra magnesium. That's fine. I'm talking about looking at it through a lens of blood sugar. Like, how is your body going to respond to this? And how fast are you going up? So the minute something is obliterated out of its fiber cell, you want to remember that it is going to be digested a lot faster and enter your bloodstream even quicker than anything wrapped in fiber. So, or anything that's paired with protein or fat. So when we look at that, from a tortilla to a cookie to breads, what's happening, and you can think about it. I love visualizing, like if you were to drop, I say, like rice flour crackers or grains of rice into a cup of water, like the rice flour crackers immediately dissolves into like a slurry of flour in water. Like that's what's happening, and how fast it's happening in your bloodstream. Whereas the rice, you're like, okay, it's slowly digesting. And the surface area, if you were to pour rice flour over a table versus rice over a table, that surface area is what's coming in contact with your epithelial lining or your gut. And that's how fast how broken down it is, how fast it can enter your bloodstream. So when we think about blood sugar and someone having something like a piece of toast, they start their day with a piece of toast. They eat it, chomp, chomp, chomp. It goes into their stomach. It's digested really fast. If there's no avocado on that, it's not paired with egg. It's just like, I really like to start my day with a piece of like cinnamon sugar toast, whatever, even crazier, right? Their blood sugar, that cinnamon toast, I always have my clients imagine the emojis of the toast. The emojis are in your stomach. They're entering your bloodstream very, very quickly. Your blood sugar is rising, and it's rising really fast. And what can happen is you have hyperglycemia, elevated blood sugar above the normal range. And the normal range, by the way, keeps dropping. So it used to be 80 to 120 is now 70 to 120 or to 110 being normal milligrams per deciliter in our bloodstream. Now you see people using glucometers, continuous glucometers, to understand how high their blood sugar is going. And what's interesting is something that's processed, like a piece of bread or a cookie, or, a desserty thing, even if it's quote unquote vegan, gluten-free, made in a non whatever way, like it is driving blood sugar up. And you might hit 120, 130, 150. These are pre-diabetic numbers. This is an exploration into hyperglycemia. Your body is responding really fast because it's like, whoa, a lot of sugars coming in really fast. We got to react really fast. Your pancreas dumps a bunch of insulin into your bloodstream, which shuts down all lipogenesis or fat burning. It takes that glucose and it goes, hurry, quick, put it away. she's coming for us. And it grabs that glucose, starts putting it away in cells, into your liver, into your muscle cells. And then if there's excess glucose, it can sit in your bloodstream. It can glycate, which is creating inflammation. It can head back to your liver and say, hurry, package this up and make it a triglyceride or a fat cell so that we can dump it back into the bloodstream. Then we have elevated triglycerides. And then those triglycerides need to ride in a cholesterol particle. So liver is like, okay, cholesterol too. Okay. And so then we have this like inflammatory process where we had something that's super processed, spike our blood sugar, a bunch of insulin comes out, and our body puts that sugar away really fast. And then we crash really hard. Yeah. And that crash is hypoglycemia. We feel cravings, we feel brain fog, we feel pretty shitty, if I'm being honest, and tired. And what's interesting is those hypoglycemic reactions and those effects are happening even when we're not in traditional hypoglycemia, even when we're not in low blood sugar, but coming from 150 down to like, let's say 95, that roller coaster of you just spiked up really fast and you're crashing down from 150 to 90. A doctor might say, oh yeah, I mean, you're not in 90. That's not bad. You're not in elevated blood sugar. You're not hypoglycemic, but I'm telling you, my clients feel horrible. Yeah. And that crash causes them to go to their pantry and go, I need something. Yeah. And back in the day, we used to go, oh, you want to balance blood sugar? 5 to 6 small meals a day. Here, you eat this breakfast, you go up for 90 minutes, you crash down for 90 minutes. Oh, you need a snack. Let's put a snack right there. We'll put a flavored yogurt or we'll put an apple, and you'll spike up and you'll crash down, and then you'll have lunch, and then you'll spike up and crash down and you'll have snack. But what they didn't account for is that people weren't, first of all, that's energetically depleting to go up and down really high and really hard and crash. But what they didn't even account for was that people weren't coming all the way back down. That curve over the day looks like, all right, I'm starting at 75 and then I'm up to 95 and then or even 105. And then I'm crashing down to 90, but I'm having a snack. And then I'm spiking up to 120. And then I'm crashing down to 100. And then I'm spiking up to 130. And that curve isn't like up and down and up and down and up and down. It truly is almost like what you hope your financial accounts look like. You're going up, you're coming down, you're going up, you're coming down, you're going up, you're coming down. But over time, you're on your way up. And that is literally what's happening to our country. People have pre-diabetes, they have PCOS, they have, all of these other diseases that are associated with elevated insulin, elevated blood sugar over time, which accounts for Alzheimer's and even these neurodegenerative diseases. Yeah.
Isn't Alzheimer's called type 3 diabetes?
That is exactly correct. And what's happened over time is doctors have said, hey, like I got your blood test once a year and your fasting glucose is 95, which you're still in the normal range. But what they don't realize is that fasting blood sugar is 95, but every single day they're going on a glycemic excursion into these diabetic numbers and creating this inflammation in the body, elevated blood sugar, hyperinsulinemia. Like insulin is always there. You're always constantly in a state of storage and putting away sugar. There's no room for lymphatic, cleansing. There's no room for glymphatic cleansing of the brain. Because what's most dangerous to the body? Elevated blood sugar. So it's going to deal with that first before it even says like, oh, I'm going to go fix this COVID virus. Oh, I'm going to go clean up these cancer cells. Oh, I'm going to go heal that knee injury. Like I can't tell you how many times elevated blood sugar gets in the way of normal detox processes in the body, normal healing in the body that could happen if there wasn't that layer of inflammation from elevated blood sugar and needing for the body. And just think about the energy at the end of the day. Like that roller coaster is real, like it is draining. And so, I don't like food rules, but I really like people to understand this basic thing, because the minute they start to feel how energetic they can be in their body every single day by just pairing foods, starting their day with a little bit of protein instead of carbohydrates, understanding that even though the world is telling them oat milk is good for them, that oats are primarily a carbohydrate, and blending them up and putting them in water is blending them out of their fiber cell, making them a liquid sugar. And when you look at them on the shelf, it's like having a little bit of orange juice. And no one's trying to say oranges are bad for you and vitamin C is amazing, but
don't drink it.
Nature did not set us up to say like, oh yeah, let's process everything and make it super highly palatable and also wreck our blood sugar.
It's crazy how the recommendation for diabetics is to drink juice.
I can't.
You know what I mean? Drink juice when your blood sugar is unstable. I'm like, don't do that.
It takes me back to like the 5 to 6 small meals a day to stoke your metabolism, which you're like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
First of all. And also, like, if a diabetic is taught to understand cellular carbohydrates and pairing foods to elongate their blood sugar curve, guess what? They're on less insulin. Guess what? They gain less weight. Guess what? They feel more energetic. Like, I am over here with my little drum and my soapbox, because I think it is appalling that this information is not taught to us in school. I mean, if I could go back and change the curriculum, I would be like, all right, let's talk about investing. Let's talk about like saving for your future. Let's talk about minimalism. Let's talk about nutrition. Let's talk about, there's so many topics that we see even online on the internet today where you're like, I feel so empowered when I know the science to make healthier choices for myself. And so I'm trying to make it approachable so that people have the knowledge to make those choices on the fly.
You know, I worked a lot with diabetes when I first started in functional medicine. It was what I kind of focused on. And people would come to me on insulin and, you know, free diabetic drugs. And their doctor was basically just like, if your blood sugar gets high, use your insulin. Like, it was like, eat whatever you want, eat your pancakes and then use your insulin. And I'm like, and they were always very overweight. And I'm like, insulin is very inflammatory and it makes you hold on to weight also. And they would literally get off their insulin within a week or two of changing their diet. I mean, quickly, and feel so good. And all they needed was some education. And I would do that. I would educate them. And then they were like, wow, they just don't know. Like, no one told me that. And it's just crazy how it's handled. And these are type 2 diabetics, not insulin dependent diabetics. Right. So it's really sad. And the way that they feed diabetics in the hospital, don't even get me started with that, because it's just literally gross. I mean, what doctors they're giving them pancakes with sugar-free syrup and cereal for breakfast. You know, it's ugh. So.
I know. It's funny. It's not funny. It's actually really heartbreaking. Every time I've had a family member go into the hospital, friend go into the hospital, the number one thing I get from my friends whose family member is in the hospital, or my clients whose family member is in the hospital, is like, Kelly, you need to do something about hospital food. Like, how are people going to heal when all they're being served up is processed carbohydrates, liquid sugars in the form of like, here's a carton of milk, here's a carton of orange juice. Here is exactly what you're saying. Those processed oats, those pancakes, the cereals, like it is a major, it's a problem at an epidemic level that is it's my job, and where I feel like I'm supporting is when I'm educating, so that people can start to see this as an issue and stand up for these types of situations. And it's crazy when you think about functional MDs like yourself, as people are like, they're magicians. They get me off all my medications. And it's truly understanding the science of nutrition that allows for this, or the science of their genetics or the science of their hormones, to say like, oh, well, you don't need to add this hormone. You need more of whatever the nutrient is that elevates that base level layer that allows for you to create this in your body, because your body isn't broken.
Yeah. Or let's support your liver.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Every time.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot. And so I hate to be like a fear monger. That's not what I want to do. So I really do find my place is in the education of understanding the basic breakdown of nutrients and how that affects our energy and how that affects our blood sugar, so that we can show up for our families, so that we don't feel like a failure. So we don't label ourselves as like a yo-yo dieter who can never pull it together. Like, that is where I feel so passionate, because I look at so many women who have these societal expectations to be a certain way, to be a certain size, and even like the rebellion against that in the last few years is interesting, but it's ultimately like we know as matriarchs of our family, as that we make a lot of decisions for our family. How we feel in our body and how we show up for them reverberates throughout our entire community, our kids, our spouses, the people we work with. So not to say that I specialize in women, but 93% of the people who hang out with me on Instagram and like that I work with are women between the ages of 25 and 55 who are making a major impact in their community, in their family. And my job is to make them feel confident in their skin and energetic to show up.
Right. And just educating them on why. I think if you know why, it's not about, I can't eat that. It's about, this doesn't serve me and this does. So I'm going to eat what makes me feel well. And that's what we try to, say to people is let's just educate you on why these foods are going to make you feel well. Eat them, see how you feel. And if you feel well, keep eating those.
Right. And I think you make a really good point, because I am an investor in Levels, which is a continuous glucose monitor. And I don't want to say backlash. The internet is just whatever it is, but there have been comments where people are like, this is like an eating disorder waiting to happen. Like this makes you restrict. And I'm like, actually, can I tell you about the education for me when there are diagnostic tools, when there are tech tools like an Oura Ring, when there are blood results, when there are hormone, like a Dutch panel, those are so empowering to me, actually, on the other side of things, where I'm like, oh, I had the pancakes with my kids, and maybe I'm making the choice for Birch Benders, which is like a paleo pancake using a lower glycemic flour, and I'm throwing some chia seeds in my mix, and I see that, and I'm using butter, or I'm using like a nut butter instead of like a bunch of syrup. And I see, oh, I didn't take this excursion to 150 like I would have if I had those pancakes at Denny's or IHOP, but I actually could keep it in a more balanced place. And I see that I'm coming down, and what I'm feeling in my body is that I'm like craving more sugar and I'm sort of crashing. What can I do to eat through this? And maybe I'm having a protein shake, or I'm having a little bit of like, I don't know, sausage that's in my freezer, or I'm using it as tool to say like,
data.
How can I elongate this blood sugar curve? How can I have these hacks to eat the things I love sometimes, and to also know, like, no offense, but wearing a Levels doesn't always keep me from having a bite of donut when my husband brings home JD flannel donuts. Like he is Be Bad by Chris, and he owns that, and that's fine. But it's really just this amazing tool to say, okay, like what is working in my body and what isn't? Because when we have that knowledge, we make swaps and we change things a little bit. And then we go like, wow, when you start connecting the feelings and the symptoms to how you're eating, it is like a hammer to a nail. Like you are nailing that door shut, because I will tell you, like, knowing, like, it may take a few times. And I think for clients too, like they eat something and they're like, oh, I felt sluggish. I had cravings. I don't feel good. I feel bloated. And you're like, okay, cool. Like, just remember that, like file that away in your brain. And then there may be like, they'll do it again. And they're like, I don't ever want to do that again. And then weeks go by and they haven't eaten that way because they have connected that feeling. And then a couple of months go by and they do it again. And they're like, oh yeah, it was good, but was it worth it? Like, and it isn't the world telling them they shouldn't eat that. It's the minute they start connecting the symptoms to their experience, when we start feeling empowered to make choices for ourselves. And that's when we start not letting our community tell us how to eat too, which is something I empower my clients to do. Like, it's real easy to go to a dinner with girlfriends and them to be like, we're ordering the flatbread and here's the wine, and like also getting dessert, and to feel this awkward. Like a lot of coaching that I do is like around not making excuses. Like, you don't have to make up a celiac diagnosis. You don't have to say like someone else told you you didn't have to eat that. You just connect those symptoms with your experience and say, I just like want to hang out with you guys, but like I don't feel like that right now, and that's okay.
And your friends, if your friends can't understand that, get some new friends. I mean, a lot of my friends don't eat like I do. They've never given me shit for it ever.
Yeah, and that's like, really important.
They will, they're like proud of me. I mean, that's how it should be.
Totally.
And going back to the glucose monitor, the levels, it's not about telling you not to eat. That's an eating disorder. It's about telling you what your body likes and what it doesn't like. It's not saying you ate too many calories, now you're going to be, overweight. It's not doing that. That's not the point.
I love
Point
that
is,
because it truly is. Like I have people jump on my Instagram and they're like, I counted your smoothie calories. And it's like, that's a 550 calorie smoothie. I'm like, yeah, that's my breakfast. And I don't snack. Like I don't feel the need to snack until lunch. And maybe lunch is 600 and dinner is 600.
right.
And what? I didn't have to white knuckle it for your 1800 calorie day, or and I'm not even thinking about those calories. I am thinking about feeling balanced and not thinking about food. And so
Yeah.
if I'm adding nut butters and chia and blueberries and protein powder and like topping it with something crunchy, like, I don't know, like that's making me happy, full, satisfied. I'm able to show up for my kids. I'm able to use my brain on a podcast like this. And I am not thinking about running downstairs to go into my pantry right now.
Right. Because you're not having that spike and drop. And that's what
That's
people
right.
don't get what that is. And, anxiety is really big where people get anxiety attacks and it's blood sugar. It's all blood sugar. It's just, they don't realize they eat sugar. They feel like this high and then they feel really weird. And then they get anxiety about their body feelings. And then it's this like cycle and they can't connect those dots. So I talk a lot about that because I had that in college. I didn't even eat a lot of sugar. It was just not eating enough, at once, and my blood sugar dropping. I would get like a panic attack. And I was like, but I wasn't hungry. So I didn't know why I feeling that way, but it was blood sugar. And now I know that. So now I know what to eat and what makes me not, act like that or feel that way.
Right. I mean, I empathize with you because that's so many women who I've worked with, even not in college, in their early 20s, like in their working world, where they like grab a coffee and they have this spike of adrenaline and cortisol, and their liver dumps a little bit of sugar in their bloodstream, and then insulin's released, and then their blood sugar crashes and they drop to a hypoglycemic level without food, and they're like, caffeine plus blood sugar dropping is a recipe for a panic attack, anxiety, not loving your life. And so, I mean, for me, when it comes to supporting clients, like I wrote in both of my books, Body Love and Body Love Every Day, that I use this thing called the Fab Four. And it's just simply pillars. There's protein, fat, fiber, and leafy greens or vegetables deep in color. And, there are days when I have the protein, fat, and fiber, and no, there's nothing like bright green on my plate, and it's an iceberg lettuce wrapped burger or whatever. Like, okay, fine. Like, but I'm looking for this protein, fat, and fiber as a way to elongate my blood sugar curve, to have a little bit of light structure around ordering at a restaurant, because I think the hard part is when you don't understand the science and you try to jump on a diet or read a book or get a PDF of like what you can and can't eat. It's so overwhelming to eat out. It's so overwhelming to know what to make. And so I just tell my clients, look at your plate or your smoothie cup or whatever the case may be. Do you have a little bit of protein? And like, is it enough to actually satisfy those hunger hormones? That's somewhere around 20 grams. That's not a huge amount, but it's not like 3 ounces of added chicken to your salad either. Like it's 4 to 6, And so that protein, then the healthy fats, like let's stop demonizing those, because that is the blanket that slows down the digestion of blood sugar. So whether that's avocado, or, if you have a histamine issue, maybe not coconut oil, olive oil, like nuts and seeds, like how are you getting your healthy fat? And then the fiber. And by the way, healthy fat is really easy to incorporate into a meal. Like people are like, do I need to add fat? I'm like, you're probably cooking with fat, or it's probably a part of your salad, or it's a part of your main meal. It's probably laced in your protein. Like but I'm just saying, like, this is not the place to have tuna and mustard. I've been there. I've done that. Let's not do that. Like, let's not do poached chicken and steamed broccoli and say that's fun to eat. Like, that's not fun to eat. So let's not eat that. So, and then the fiber and greens piece is like, how are you adding produce to your plate? How are you adding fiber to your plate? How are you getting those antioxidants and phytochemicals that are showing that we aren't creating inflammatory markers? Like there's a big movement to move to carnivore diet, and there are people who have dealt with major anxiety. And I've used the carnivore diet with a few physicians with serious cases. But when we look at the research there, like if someone is only eating red meat and they're not getting any prebiotic fibers, there was a new study that came out that showed that When you have red meat paired with prebiotic fibers and fibers in produce, the inflammatory byproducts and markers are non-existent. So people who say that eating red meat causes inflammation and it causes cancer, when you eat a balanced meal and you have fiber and produce, those inflammatory markers are non-existent.
Right.
So
I eat red meat all the time.
so do I. And I tell you, I've like had women who've had, period issues, irregularities, anemia, like all of these things support fertility. So a lot of times when I work with a client who's like in their pre-pregnancy years, or if they're thinking about having children, I'm always asking, like, because it's so nutrient dense with B vitamins and proteins and iron, I am looking for ways to incorporate that. But I just hate when things are demonized.
Yeah, I hate that too, because everyone's so different too.
Right.
So, but when it comes to blood sugar, that's why those monitors can help, because everyone is so different. So it can tell you what works best for you. So,
Right.
yeah. So what do you think of intermittent fasting?
Yeah, I think, well, here's the reality. I think if someone has worked on blood sugar balance and they are not an easily stressed person, it can be supportive. And I like it thinking about it as time restricted eating. And there's this like movement to wait until 2 p.m, eat between 2 and 6 or 2 and 8. And I'm not really keen on that for blood sugar purposes, because a lot of times what happens is they don't eat all day. And you talk about hypoglycemia from not eating. You talk about anxiety. You talk about someone over obsessing and thinking about food. By the time 2 o'clock rolls around, they eat so fast. They're looking for more. And then it's almost like I say, they pony up to the trough. Like they will just eat from that moment until they go to bed. And when we look at the best time to eat, it's when the light hours, and eating syncs our circadian rhythm. There's a lot of people talking about light in the eyes in the first 30 minutes of waking up and how that syncs your circadian rhythm. And it does. Caffeine is supportive supportive and can also hurt a circadian rhythm. So having caffeine too late can be impacted in a negative way, but like food also plays a role. So I am a fan of like being like a grandma. Can you eat between 9 and 5 or 9 and 6? Can you eat like, my thing is always telling clients, like, don't wait too long.
Yeah.
Because it backfires on the back end. And also we know if someone's intermittent fasting and they move into a high glycemic meal, it is actually worse. So we see more inflammatory markers like interleukin-6 go up, see reactive protein go up. We see major dysregulation of blood sugar because your body hasn't eaten anything. And not to say that it's highly sensitive, but it is sensitive, more sensitive. And so when you're eating, go from not eating, it's not a free ticket to roll into a pizza or a sandwich, something that may have more processed carbohydrates, because we see blood sugar go even higher. So when it's like, when I have a client, say a pregnant client who's dealing with nausea and they have protein aversions, I'm always looking for ways for them to even just start their day with protein. Can you, and I may not even like recommend dairy all the time, but it's a very like strategic way to be like, okay, like maybe it's cottage cheese or like a Greek yogurt, or maybe it's like a couple spoonfuls of nut butter, a handful of cashews or something. Like, can I get you some protein like right in those first early hours? Because we're going to have less of a roller coaster. You're going to be less sensitive. You're going to have less hyper and hypoglycemia. And it's just changes the way you eat the whole rest of the day.
I was literally on the phone with a friend earlier today who's pregnant, and she's so nauseous. And I said, you have to force yourself to eat protein. She's like, I can't. I said, you have to. The blood sugar drops are going to make you more nauseous. I'm like, even if it's 3 bites, just do something. And she's like, okay.
That's honestly the best advice you could give her, because I can't tell you how many people in the first trimester, what happens is they start to get a little bit of nausea, and then they have protein aversions, and then all they do is eat carbohydrates. They're full of insulin. They're putting on sugar weight fast. Yeah. And remember, this is not the time in which the baby is growing the fastest. Like that's happening in the end of the second trimester and the third trimester when the baby's like putting on weight. But what this is doing to you, it's putting weight on you, and which is fine. But what's worse is that spike and crash that really takes nausea to the next level. And then you can't get off this eating behavior. So even as you move into your 12th or 14th week, when the nausea is starting to calm down and your placenta is taking over, and it's like, hey, we got this for you. I know you had it the first trimester and you were like it was like hard on your body. This organ is built in your body to support the baby's growth. And so your nausea starts to calm down and the food aversion starts to go away. But you've been on this blood sugar carbivore roller coaster, and it's really hard to reset your ship in the second and third trimester when you've spent 3 months eating a certain way. And so my goal, and sometimes the wheels fall off, and that's how we eat. Like I've had 2 different pregnancies. Sebastian was really easy to be like all Fab4, hanging out, smoothies, salads, like working out, feeling great, have a toddler at home, get pregnant, a little nutrient depleted. And with Toshin was like, oh, I can't have eggs unless they're wrapped in siete tortilla. Like,
Yeah.
Food aversions, really leaning on the cottage cheese to help me, kind of like, or like a spoonful of nut butter, handful of nuts in the morning to help me with that. But it was so much more effort at the beginning of the second trimester to really start to undo those food behaviors, because everyone eats cyclically. I'm sure you've had clients, you're like, and they'll tell you, which is a little bit frustrating, it was a good day, it was a bad day, I'm in a good run, I'm at a bad run. Like, but first of all, shame and guilt aside, like that is totally normal. And practitioners, coaches, trainers, like friends, like they help you right your ship, so that's what I'm here to do with clients is like, okay, that happens to me all the time. Like, you should see the first trimester with Toshin. Like it was a roller coaster, and I know the science, but it's like what you feel in your body and what you crave. So the perfect advice you could ever give her is that, because what you're doing is you're supporting it from being Montezuma's revenge roller coaster to, hey, you're in the kiddie park on the kiddie train, and it's a little bit of an up and down, but you're not feeling those crashes that really induce nausea.
So true. I said, leave some almond butter next to your bed with a spoon, like, because I had to do that to even get out of bed. I had hyperemesis. So I was,
oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
With
you
all
and
three.
Princess Kate.
Yeah, it was awful. I mean, I was in the hospital on IVs. It was bad, but I made myself eat, even though I would throw it right up. I would still make myself eat because I knew I had to.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, so there's a perfect example. Like pregnancy will throw a curveball at anyone, and it is, you have to roll with the punches, and you just have to check in with yourself. So like, you're not going to be the person at the second trimester to be like, cool, I can totally get on the like protein and veggie train. You are just like, I do need something in my body for these babies, and I'm on the IVs, and I'm getting the support from the hospital to do that.
Yeah. I actually, surprisingly though, after I got through the nausea part, I only wanted healthy food. Like I craved salads.
That's amazing.
And I was like, I craved like lemon and onion, which I don't even eat onion and normally.
Yeah.
I'm like, if onion is my weirdest craving, I'll take it. So I was lucky in that way. But so tell us about, I know you have your 2 books, and then you have an online program, right?
Yeah. So I have the 2 books, Body Love and Body Love Every Day. Body Love is the primer on blood sugar. Body Love Every Day goes into the nuances and breaks it down by like how people normally eat. If they're an on-the-go eater, like grabbing stuff quick, or if they're like a plant-based eater, or if they're like what I call the domestic goddess, which is someone who makes meals for their family from scratch. They're like making tomato sauce. Good for them. I kind of fall in girl on the go, right? I'm like, how can I take 5 things and make a dinner for my family fast? So all of those resources are in those books. My courses are the Fab4 Fundamentals, which if you're like, I don't read books, but I want to see modules of you with like the downloadable Kelly notes, which I call, basically Cliff Notes. I have the Fab4 Fundamentals for that. Fab4 Pregnancy goes through like the nutrients you need through pregnancy, how to get off the blood sugar roller coaster, tips and tricks, products I love to support you, like the siete tortillas, how you can think about like pairing your foods, even with maybe some processed carbohydrates to support blood sugar balance. I have the Fab4 Under 4, which really talks about blood sugar balance for kids and how you're balancing their plate to balance their blood sugar. It's a really critical time when cognitive development and learning is happening, when we deal with big feelings and mood changes, like toddler style meltdowns. Like I can't tell you how many times I'm linking like Sebastian's intake of sugar to his behavior. And
oh, totally.
We don't want to label our children as being like overly emotional and with the inability to regulate if all we're serving them is liquid sugar and processed carbohydrates, and just saying, well, that's all they'll eat. Like, and I know that Tashin, my second, I mean, he's just going to give it to me all the way around. Like Bash was like the easiest eater to eat healthy food. And like, I did the exact same thing with Tashin, and he is like, no, mom, potatoes, only potatoes. And I'm like, okay, so there are challenges for every single parent. And I'm very empathetic to that. And so really it's just a non-judgmental, be like, here's what I would do, even if it means slathering a nut butter on something for your child, or
even
swapping
butter.
Yeah, I love it. Grass-fed butter, conjugated linoleic acid. Let's do it. So the Fab 4 Under 4 is for kids. And then I have a smoothie course, because I think smoothies, for so long and still today, when I'm on the internet, I cringe, because I'm like, you literally could have a candy bar. There's no protein, fat, and fiber. You've obliterated all this sugar in a liquid sugar, and now you're going to drink it and have depleted energy the rest of the day. So I have a smoothie course. I have a journal that helps you like just understand, link those food choices to your feelings and how your symptoms, the symptoms that you're having. And I'm working on book 3.
Powder.
I have a protein powder. I have a beef-based protein powder. It's grass-fed beef isolate. We take fleshy bones, we stew them down like bone broth. We skim the fat, we dehydrate the water, chemical-free extraction, 24 grams of protein, 16 of which are collagen amino acids. So a really complex blend. But 3 ingredients. I use organic cacao or organic vanilla and monk fruit only. I'm happy to share those with my children. I have an unflavored for people who can't do sugar, or maybe cacao or vanilla doesn't work for them. Coming out with a vegan-based protein, which is going to be a variety of the lupini bean. So the lupini bean is a lectin-free, low phytate bean that is grown in the Andes and referred to as chocho, grown in Australia and referred to as lupin. And I was going to go with chocho. I might be, I'm like on hold, because I got access to a really nice lupin flour. So more complex. Great. It's not just like a protein powder. It's not extracted via chemical. So there's a little bit of fiber and fat in that base. But again, very simple, just hold and ground product, which I'm really proud of. So
that's awesome. I'm excited for that, because people with histamine issues always, because I have a beef protein as well. And people, with histamine issues, I don't let them have it. And they're like, well, what's one I can use? I'm like, I don't like any of the vegan protein powders out. So don't,
I know.
But yeah. So, okay. And then where else can everyone find you? Because you have a great Instagram.
At Be Well by Kelly
podcast. Yeah.
At Be Well by Kelly, at Be Well by Kelly. Come here, Dr. Becky, on my podcast. Come hang out on Instagram. And I'm trying to keep it light and fun. I'm not as fun as you and your like Halloween costume reels, but it's interesting. Like, I've been doing this for 10 years. I've been online for 10 years. It was always like a place to be like, how can I share a swap for a recipe, or how can I inspire or share a study? And Instagram and TikTok are becoming this like very casual, fun place.
Yeah.
And where people show the reality of their life. And it isn't a highlight reel as much anymore. And I'm really loving that. So it's just, I'm learning to let people in to the fact that like, I am a normal human, hashtag normal human, like normal issues. And so yeah, and just there to inspire and share a little bit of my life.
Yeah, it is fun, because people get to see like, your real side, or me. I have a total quirky side, and
I love that about you.
But yeah, well, everyone, make sure you check her out. She does have a really great podcast. I love your podcast. I listen to it all the time. So
thanks.
Thank you so much for coming on. And I know everyone's going to eat this episode up. So thank you everyone for listening as well. And please leave a review and mention Kelly's episode in the review. We would love that. And I hope everybody has a great day.